Distinguished professor and a professor of Iranian studies and the chairman of the Department of Central Eurasian Studies at Indiana University, Bloomington. He was nominated by the US President and confirmed by the US Senate as a member of the council overseeing the US National Endowment for Humanities. Professor Choksy has held fellowships from the Institute of Advanced Study at Princeton, National Endowment for Humanities at Washington, D.C., Guggenheim Foundation, the Center for Advanced Study in Behavioral Sciences at Stanford, American Philosophical Society, and the American Academy of Religion. Professor Choksy is a consulting editor for Encyclopedia Iranica. He is also the author of Triumph Over Evil, Purity and Pollution in Zoroastrianism, which was published in 1989, Conflict and Cooperation, Zoroastrian Subalterns and Muslim Elites in Medieval Iranian Society, published in 1997, and Evil, Good, and Gender, Facets of the Feminine in Zoroastrian Religious History, published in 2002. Professor Choksy.
Thank you very much for inviting me, and a special thanks to Archie for all the arrangements. Really appreciate it. Thank you. And thank you all for attending on a weekend where you should, in fact, be free from such duties. You are supposed, if you're a good Zoroastrian, to spend 1/3 of your days and your lives learning something about the religion. So let's just consider this part of that 1/3, okay? And as always, thanks for everything you do. Thank you. So, when I was asked to come and talk here, I was given two assignments. One was Zarathustra's birth and early life, and then and his enlightenment, and then the second part was the Gathas. And as I thought about this, I thought, well, why do I want to do two separate talks? Why don't I just combine them into one? So I sort of took certain liberties, and the way I ended up doing this was, let's call it Zarathustra's mission and community. What I'd like to do is essentially look at what the Gathas tell us. So what can we glean from the Gathas about Zarathustra's lives? I was also, violating your rules by bringing your bottle here, but I thought you don't want me walking out to the water fountain on a regular basis. So my goal today is to sketch out Zarathustra's career as maybe reconstructed from the Gathas, particularly since the Gathas are the one set of texts that we can probably attribute back to the prophet himself. Reference will be made as well today, just briefly, to the Pahlavi and New Persian legends of Zarathustra to fill gaps. In so doing, the Gothic vision of the prophet's career will be related to the later hagiography, that is the sacred biography, that we find in Middle Persian or the Pahlavi text, okay? So we'll look at the Gothic stuff and see what that really what can that tell us about Zarathustra's career? Because rather than looking at the Zaratoshname, the text, the much later texts. And then, if we have time, because I think we have to, we can take breaks because I know audience attention fades after about 20-25 minutes. So maybe we'll just take little breaks along the way. Particularly since I've been given this enormous assignment from about 10:45 to 12:30. My gosh! So my students would just quit; they'd just leave. So just raise your hands and say, "Look, you're all falling asleep. Let's take a break. Let's take a couple of breaks, okay?" But if we have time, I'll also survey information on Zarathustra's earliest followers. That's available in the Avestan scriptures. But let's start with Zarathustra, and let's start with the sources, okay? So we have considerable details of Zarathustra's life and activities are available from the late Sasanian and post-Sasanian Pahlavi books, especially the Denkard, the Acts of the Religion, particularly books 5 and 7 of the Denkard. But these are written 9th through 11th centuries of Common Era. Zarathustra's time, it was often believed that he lived maybe just before the Achaemenids of the Persian Empire. We now linguistically and archaeologically push him far back off the Iranian plateau into Central Asia, somewhere between, let's say, 1200 and 1800 BCE, so into the Bronze Age, okay? That would correlate well with what we know about Vedic Sanskrit and all the rest, to which, as some of you may know, Gothic Avestan is a very, very close cognate. So, the Denkard, a much later text, has Zarathustra's life. We have the Vizidagiha, the selections, written in the 9th century, again of the Common Era, by a magus named Zoroastrian. And then we have similar details plus additional information found in the Farsi, the New Persian, Zarathustrami. But that's even later. The Pahlavi Bundahishan, the final version of the Bundahishan again dates to about the 12th century of the Common Era. That repeats in various forms information found in the other Pahlavi texts. So the major problem with the account of the life of Zarathustra, as found in the late Sasanian and post-Sasanian literature,
Christy, please come to
is
the
not
information
that
desk.
the problem is not that it contains a core of earlier material. It does. Rather, the problem lies in that the oldest materials that are preserved in the Pahlavi and New Persian sources have been considerably reworked. Okay? They've been reworked to satisfy the changing times. The accounts we have in the Middle Persian and the New Persian texts reflect the eras in which they were written. What we now know is, for example, is that the Pahlavi accounts of Zarathustra, accounts that form the basis of the even later New Persian traditions, had been recast by Iranians during the centuries of contact with other religious groups in the ancient Near East. So, with Judaism, with Christianity, and even with Islam. The sacred biography of the Prophet Zarathustra, as it currently exists, particularly in the Zarathustrami, came to be remodeled along the lines of the stereotypical image of the life cycle and prophetic career that ancient Near Eastern holy men were supposed to have. So events such as an auspicious birth, or even signs beforehand of an auspicious birth. A childhood filled with propitious events and miraculous acts. An early adult life filled with religious questions, devotional quests, and years of wandering or isolation in remote places. Revelation followed by an initial ministry. Rejection and relocation. Success in a new setting. A triumphal return to the old area. And a tragic death. That is what we have that we know is the standard model for holy men in Near Eastern settings, Middle Eastern settings. And yes, the later biography of Zarathustra replicates so much of that. But several aspects of the lives of holy men and even women must necessarily cover, and therefore their sacred biographies will contain, many of these features, such as their seeking a new religious path, coupled with rejection or alteration, rejection by the already established faith followers, or those followers gradually coming around. So, what I would like to suggest today is that Zarathustra's life, even in its earliest versions, must have involved certain aspects generic to the careers of holy men, even those we see later on in Middle Eastern holy men. But to gain a precise picture, or even a reasonably accurate one of Zarathustra's life and career, it is vital that the reconstruction of his career begin with the records fairly contemporaneous to the prophet, that is the gathas rather than be based on much later Pahlavi, New Persian, and even Arabic sources. So, I'd like to, that's why I said, combine the Prophet's career assignment you gave me with the Gathas and see what we can get, okay? Now the Gathas, unlike the Pahlavi and New Persian texts, tell us nothing about Zarathustra's birth, childhood, or youth. Okay? That stuff comes from the Middle Persian and the New Persian documents. For those early years, yes, it is unavoidable, but look at those. But if we are going to look at those sources, I would suggest we need to look at them very cautiously, understanding there are motifs that are obviously of Middle Eastern origin, as opposed to the Iranian plateau or Central Asia. Okay? So the image of his mother being ostracized by her neighbors and having to seek, with her husband, a new place to give birth to the child is clearly a biblical image that overlaid the original life saga of Zarathustra. As the centuries went by and Zarathustra's prestige as a prophet increased, first probably in Central Asia and later on the Iranian plateau, more and more incredible stories would have been ascribed to his life and his actions. So, perhaps a childhood tendency to stone harmful insects and reptiles known as krafta. Perhaps childhood actions lie at the basis of a tale of Zarathustra as a boy hurling mammoth boulders at Angramanu, the angry or evil spirit. Ever-increasing chronological and spatial remoteness from his place and time would have allowed even pious fictions to augment the prophet's hagiography or biography. In this manner, the Zarathustra legend probably began to develop shortly after the prophet's lifetime. It could not have been simply a reworking of the life saga of a holy man who lived before the Gathas, as originally proposed by Marjan Molay in the 60s. There's one train of thought that what we have as the life of Zarathustra is sort of that of another holy man. Okay? There's also a train of thought advanced by Callens and Sharba that it reflects a collective thought rather than an individual. While the Gathas tell us nothing about Zarathustra's early years, the verses therein may assist in reconstructing his career. The one previous study of the textual order of the Gathas by Dushenkimo in the 50s proved inconclusive. However, unlike the books of the Old Testament, the Hebrew Bible or Tanakh, attributed to Moses, which were written so as to provide a pseudo-historical and semi-chronological framework for the earliest Israelites, or the synoptic Gospels of Matthew, Mark, and Luke that provide a semi-chronological sketch of Jesus' life and times, or even the Quran, whose final present arrangement of chapters is roughly the reverse order in which they were probably recited by Muhammad to his followers. As opposed to those arrangements, the existing arrangement of the Gathas, both in terms of chapters and verses within each chapter, seem to be liturgical. That is, they are connected to the sequence of the yasna ritual performed each day, rather than chronological. That is, they don't reflect the order in which they were spoken or composed by Zarathustra. Whereas the Quran appears to be in the reverse order, the shortest verses at the end appear to have been the initial revelations. The biblical texts very clearly are laid out to establish the Israelites as the chosen community of God, the synoptic Gospels to lay out a life of Jesus. But so the Gothic texts seem to be a liturgically arranged text, centering ultimately around the Gathas and the Yasna Hak and Haiti, the Yasna of the 7 chapters. But I would say that this should not deter us from extracting the available information on Zarathustra's prophetic career and trying to see what that information can tell us in a chronological fashion. This is not to suggest that the chapters and verses of the Gathas be rearranged. No, that is a liturgy. That has a religious function. So for religious functions, the traditional arrangement should be maintained. As I said, this order is associated with ritual. But for understanding contemporaneous evidence about Zarathustra, the documents can be rearranged very approximately in the order of events likely during the prophet's adult life. So what can we say about the prophet's career? Let's begin sort of about a third of the way in. The nadir, the low point of Zarathustra's apostolic profession. This is well known. Words filled with uncertainty about the future gushed forth and eventually were recorded in the Gathas as chapter or Haithi 46:1 of the Yasna. Okay. Kam nemoi zam, katra nemoi I am. To which land shall I go? Where shall I go? He goes on to add, in translation, let me say, they ostracize me from the family and the tribe. My current community gives me no satisfaction, nor do the deceitful despots of the land. How shall I satisfy you, O our master? Zarathustra went on to acknowledge the reasons for his weakness in the next verse, 46:2, in translation. I know why I lack power. It is because of the sparseness of my livestock, and because I have only a few men. So Zarathustra sought a patron who would protect him, which he goes on to talk about in Yasna 46:7. O master, whom do you appoint as a guardian for one such as me, when a deceitful person tries to capture and harm me? This Gothic chapter, especially Yasna 46:11, also makes clear who the prophet's opponents were. In translation again, the Karapans and the Kavis, through their power, forced mortals to perform evil acts in order to destroy life. To determine how matters reached a point when Zarathustra, and presumably his family and early supporters, had to flee, it is necessary to turn back to the beginning of his prophetic career. I would suggest that originally the first chapter of the Gathas, the first recitation of Zarathustra, probably was Yasna 29. The lament of the cow's soul, symbolized in that chapter, is not only suffering attributed to bovines, as they were sacrificed in the religious rites of Zarathustra's time. That is, their slaughter and immolation with haoma, but also metaphorically, as has long been known, the plight of weak and dispossessed people who were compelled to serve wealthy, probably Bronze Age, Proto-Iranian chiefs. Remember, we refer to them as Iranians only once they are on the plateau that we now call Iran. So, this Yasna 29, the lament of the cow's soul, can be seen as a metaphor for what is occurring to those who cannot oppose the powerful chiefs, the priests patronized by those chiefs, and the deities worshipped by those priests and chiefs. So if you look at Yasna 29:1, the soul of the cow laments to you, for whom did you fashion me? Who created me? Wrath, oppression, anger, malice, and violence keep me bound. I have no shepherd other than you. So reveal yourself to me through good persuasion. Moving on to the 4th verse of that chapter. May Mazda, who exactly recalls acts of brutality, make note here and now of those acts that have been perpetrated by demons and mortals. And thereafter may he make note of those acts that will be perpetrated by those in the future. Zoroastrian scripture attributed the following response to Ahura Mazda in Yasta 29:8, same chapter. Here, I have found Zarathustra Spitama, the only one who listens to our instructions. He wishes to sing hymns of praise for us, for Mazda and order, so that I may relish the beauty of his words. This is the presentation scene, when the word of God was used to legitimize both Zarathustra as the prophet and Zarathustra's subsequent words and deeds as one sanctioned by Ahura Mazda. So, start with the scene where you have the oppression, you have the request, you have the divinely attributed response. Here is the path. Here is the individual who will guide you. Now, new preachers are often without a substantial popular base among the community, and hence not particularly effective at first. This situation, that is Zarathustra's initial position of weakness at the inception of his oracular career, is echoed in critical words subsequently attributed to the soul of the cow in Yasta 29:9. The cow responds to this presentation scene. Why must I be satisfied with the powerless caretaker, with the voice of a weak man, when I wish for one who possesses substantial power? I would suggest that despite those doubts, which are clearly raised, because they cannot be sidestepped, the socio-religious framework had been laid for Zarathustra to gain authority, literally to gain the voice, to preach and to protect others. Within his society's setting, Zarathustra could now seek revelation from Ahura Mazda, requesting knowledge that would grant him the power and the influence to become a prophet. That quest to become the prophet was referred to in Yasta 28, particularly 28:1, 28:5, 28:6. In reverence for him, with outstretched hands, I entreat, first of all, O Mazda, for the actions that support the Holy Spirit through truth, by which you reward the mind filled with good thoughts and reward the soul of the cow. Zarathustra goes on, 28:5, saying, O order, O truth, shall I ever see you? And then in the very next verse, through order grant us a long-lasting gift via your sacred utterances, O Ahura Mazda. Let it provide strong support to Zarathustra and to everyone by his side, so that we may hereby surmount the enemy's hostilities. So what I want to say is that despite the liturgical order, if you start looking at the Gathas, you can actually see the parts of a prophetic career emerging. Okay? The conditions that compel the career to emerge. The scene where the individual is being advanced as the religious leader. The individual seeking religious knowledge. And then the Gathas tell us that Zarathustra's quest was fulfilled when he perceived our master and realized the divinity's beneficial nature. These visions are recounted in the Gathas in Yasna 43:5 and 31:8. When I realized you are holy, O our master, when I saw you were the primal one at the beginning of existence. And in 31:8, the verse, thus, when I beheld you with my eyes, O master, I realized spiritually that you, the primal one, are eternal, the father of good thought, the creator of order, and the Ahura watching the deeds in the world. So now he knows who to follow. Thereafter, Zarathustra supposedly could ask the divinity questions. Questions about the fundamentals of creation and existence, which were recorded in that very same Gothic chapter. So, you start 31:8, where he says, I beheld you. 31:14-16, Zarathustra says, I ask you, O our master, about the things that are coming, that will reach us. I ask you, O our master, about the retribution for the evildoer. I ask you, O our master, about that generous person like you who truthfully strives to promote good authority. Similar questions will be forthcoming later in Yasna 44. For example, 44 verse 3. I ask you this, O Ahura, tell me truthfully, who in creation is the primal father of order? Who created the course of the sun and the stars? Through whom does the moon wax and wane? These things and more I wish to know, O Master. So, as we track this career, this is still the early stages of his career, before he has this question of where to flee. He's been presented as the receiver of revelation. He's been shown receiving the revelation, and now he's been depicted questioning the divinity in terms of receiving additional revelation. Zarathustra, unsure as yet of gaining the Ahura's support, assured our master that his own, that is Zarathustra's followers, were large in number, while acknowledging that his opponents were even more numerous, and therefore that the divinity's support was urgently needed. We see this again, Yasna 34:1 and 34:8. The act, word, and veneration through which you acquire immortality, truth, and power of virtue, O Master. Each of these is offered by us who are present in large numbers. But the multitude of evildoers around is greater. It appears to have been precisely Zarathustra's uncertainty in the unwavering support of his chosen deity, and Zarathustra's fear that his opponents would overwhelm the few supporters he had. Then probably still his extended family, including a cousin who's named Medhyomanka, and a few friends, that compelled him to seek repeated assurances from our master. Yasna 34:6. If this is the way you really are, O Master, in order and good thought, then make that clear to me for all the days of my life. 34:12. What is your command? What do you wish? What praise, what veneration can we offer? Proclaim your wish, O Master, so we can hear it.